You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
Hi, I'm Paul Wilson, ex-international player and international umpire, and I'm a guest on the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Joining me on today's cricket discussion is a former Australian Test cricketer. He played only one Test match for Australia in 1998 against India. Despite a short Test career, he played 11 ODIs for Australia between 1997 to 1998, taking 13 wickets. After his playing days, he made the transition into umpiring, and as an ICC international umpire, he umpired 13 Test matches, 62 ODIs, and 39 T20 internationals between 2014 to 2023. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Paul Blocker Wilson. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jack. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, Paul. Obviously, you are the fourth Australian Test cricketer that we've had on the podcast, behind Nathan Horrocks, Jason Gillespie, and Peter George, who you know well, obviously with umpiring here in Australia. And you're also the fourth umpire that we've had on the podcast as well. Obviously, Daryl Harper, Mary Walden, and obviously Peter George, of course, have followed, and you're the fourth. So no one can take that away from you, Paul. Like they can't take away the fact that you played for Australia. No one will take away the fact that you are the fourth Australian player on the podcast and the fourth umpire we've interviewed as well. So a huge honour for you there, Paul.
Yeah, well, I wear a few different hats, Jack. So, and that's obviously they're two major hats, being a player and an umpire. So it's a pretty cool club to be in.
Yes, definitely, and we'll get into that as we get into our chat today. And I hope everyone watching and listening will enjoy it as much as me and Paul will be chatting and having a great chat about the game of cricket that we all love. That's why we're here, and that's why we love the game of cricket, because of that. Paul, as I do with all my guests that I've interviewed on the podcast, I like to take them back to when they first got into cricket, and it's been very fascinating listening to people's memories on how they started to get into cricket. So, Paul, let's go back to the very beginning growing up. I know that's a long time ago.
For some of us, yeah.
Yes. What were your earliest memories of watching, playing, and even going to the cricket, and who were some of your cricketing idols growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke about this recently. I think like most of us in my generation, it was backyard cricket with your mates, whether it's in the street, whether it's in people's properties. I was lucky I grew up in Lake Macquarie, a place called Kilburn Bay. So a lot of our properties were reasonably large, so you could generate a pretty good cricket field. And obviously the fielders would be trees, fruit trees, whatever you like. So all those rules applied. So I played a lot of that as a kid growing up. And obviously at school as well, so recess breaks, lunch breaks. Went to Cold Point Primary School, not far from home, so I did a lot of that with mates. And then my parents registered me as I think it was a 9-year-old with the under 10s with the Kilburn Bay Cricket Club, and so it progressed from there. So my journey was very similar to others. That I played a lot of backyard cricket with families during Christmas time, going away on Easter breaks, etc., with other families, friends of ours. So that was my upbringing in cricket, and obviously watching on television. Born in 72, so all the way through the 70s, Australia was a stronger nation and World Series cricket kicked in. So I remember my parents took me down to the SCG to watch a World Series cricket game in the late 70s. It was my first impression of seeing the cricket live. You could take anything on the hill then, alcohol, food, everything. So it's a bit different to these days, you can imagine. But that was my first impression live. And then, as I said, kicked into being a kid playing cricket from a local cricket club, and it sort of went on from there. So progressed from that, I suppose, that the joy of playing with mates and family to then going into that sort of formalised cricket environment, and sort of went from there. So it was great fun. It's probably not seen as much now as we was back in my time, if you like. I hate saying that, but we're talking the 70s and early 80s, so it's changed a lot. But it's not surprising to hear a lot of players in all eras that they started their journey playing in the backyard, or playing with mates, playing in the street, very similar to other parts of the world as well. So that was my start, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
my idols. Growing up for me it's quite funny. I've just come back from America where I've spent a lot of time with a lot of West Indian cricketers, current and former. And I think, again, the West Indies was sort of Australia's favourite team or second favourite team, particularly during the early 80s. And remember, backyard cricket, if you want to be Australia or the West Indies, I'll be putting my hand up to be the West Indies. They were just a phenomenal team, great to watch, entertaining. Growing up, Dennis Lee was my hero as a bowler. Then it came on to Craig McDermott. And then all the bowlers sort of from then on, the West Indian bowlers, as I said, you take your pick on which ones you like. I love watching Malcolm Marshall. Holding was phenomenal. So as a bowler and a kid growing up, they were the type of players that I sort of gravitated to. And I was lucky enough, the cricket club I played for at home here in Newcastle, Robert Dutchy Holland was at my cricket club. So I actually had a Test cricketer at my club, which is pretty cool to have. So he was obviously my hero as well, someone that went on to play for Australia.
Yes, definitely. I suppose, Paul, you had the attributes of being a West Indian fast bowler, tall and long-limbed, and could do that. But it's quite fascinating that a lot of Australians and in fact people from world cricket say that West Indies are probably their second team that they like to support, especially back in those days in the 70s and 80s. Obviously, it's sad to see the way that they've declined in recent years, but hoping they can get back to their former glory. So when did you start realizing that, I could pursue a career in cricket? When did you realize that I could be good enough to probably play Sheffield Shield cricket or state cricket here in Australia, for those who are listening?
That's a hell of a question. I went to the Cricket Academy in 1991. So I sort of went there. I sort of invited myself, if you like, sent a letter off to the academy, which was the AIS at the time. They allowed me to come down and what I thought was go down, do a bit of training with this academy, bring my program back to Newcastle and utilise that at home. But Rod Marsh, who was his first year as head coach of that academy, along with Richard Doan and Brian McFadgen were the coaches. They gave me a chance not only to train, but kept me on as an associate scholar. And that was in 1991. And I started as part of that program with the academy. We played against second 11s from around the country. And I started doing okay in those matches, 4-day matches and 1-day games. And I think it was probably at that stage there in 91 going to 92 that I thought, actually, I might be okay. I actually might be good enough, hopefully, to play first-class cricket. So that was probably the time. Never really before then. It was more of a dream, more of a hope. But then actually playing against some of and they were quintessentially second 11 teams, the second best in their states. So when I started performing well against them, I thought, hey, actually, I might be okay at this. And then I went on to Academy Tour in 92 in South Africa, came back in a full year again with the academy in 92, and then I went on to play 2 years in Sydney whilst I was at the academy, and I came back to South Australia in 93, where I became part of that squad, and I was able to play for South Australia in that first season when I was full-time back in South Australia. So that was the time frame, that sort of 1 or 2 years, I realised that, hey, maybe I'm okay.
Yeah, and as you further progress in your career, did the thoughts about playing for Australia entered your mind? Obviously, the 90s were pretty a dominant period in Australian cricket, and there were a lot of great players around in Shield cricket and for the national team. Did you realise then that it's going to be bloody tough to get in to playing for Australia? But did that enter your mind at all, that if I work hard and keep doing what I'm doing, then it could be a realistic dream eventually?
It was always a dream. I never thought it'd be a possibility, Joe. It was just, as you said, we were entering an enormously strong period of Australian cricket. Obviously, we probably look back at it as one of the, if not the strongest period we've ever had. So ultimately, for me, I thought the only opportunity I was ever going to get was just being in the right place at the right time, and that right place, unfortunately, probably meant there's going to be some injuries, particularly when it comes to fast bowling. There's always injuries at some point. So if I was bowling well enough, but there was a couple of, maybe a gap opened up, which is the only thing I could really hope for, I was sort of in the second or third crop of bowlers that selectors would have been looking at. It just has so happened that when I got my time, there were a few injuries. I was performing well in white ball cricket. And at that stage, the Australian selectors, or the ACB at the time, decided to go for specific teams. So 97, 98 was actually the time frame when Australia decided to go with a more white ball specialist team, as opposed to prior to that, we selected a white ball team or a one-day team, which was very similar to the test team. But in 97, 98, we actually had a difference in the sides. And then all of a sudden, for me, that meant that someone like myself and others, we got an opportunity of playing up the ranks, if you like, playing one-day cricket. And that's sort of where the door opened up with a couple of injuries, and away I went. So that sort of 97, 96, 97 onwards was probably the time I thought, well, I might be a chance, very slim, but unfortunately it probably would come about because someone unfortunately got injured. But hopefully I'd be in the right place at the right time, bowling well, and I was. So which helped my cause at the time.
Yeah, and obviously you played with some of these players that would become your teammates when you did enter the sides in the international setup. But what was it like, bowling to, some of Australian cricket's best batters at that time in domestic cricket? Must have been one hell of a challenge, but something that you relished.
Yeah, we all did. I mean, you had to do well or you're out the door. I mean, it was just such a strong period. Any team we played, any state we played, everyone was a very, very strong side, including ours. I mean, we look back at it and we weren't as successful maybe some other states, but even the South Australian team was very strong. But it just went to show you how strong the other teams were, in that era. So really, just had to learn on the run. A lot of the time, learning in the change room after a game, sitting down with your opposition players and learning about the game, not just in the 4 days you played, but over a beer in the change room, which is a critical part of learning as you went along. So yeah, it was an enormous challenge every game. There was never an easy game at all, far from it. And it was a great era to play in.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk about that test match, Paul, 1998 against India. Eden Gardens, which is one of the most iconic venues in cricket, really. And you've been lucky enough to play a game there. Obviously, this test match, but also in your capacity as an umpire as well afterwards. Be lucky enough to go to India and umpire in those amazing stadiums around the world. It was a very short test career, only brief, only one test. And obviously, we had Peter George on the podcast, and he's a part of the One Test Club as well as yourself and many others in Australian cricket, which is quite a lot over the years for various reasons. But, it was a pretty tough test match, Paul, for Australia. They lost by an innings, 209 runs.
And plenty,
and they lost the series, which was 2-1 in the end in the best of three. India won the first and the second test, and Australia won the last test, but it was too late by then. And obviously for you, a bit of a mixed bag of emotions, really, when you look at it. Didn't take a wicket, didn't score a run, but you were not out. And the team lost, and that was it. Didn't play. Other people would have different one-off tests. They either did something miraculous or they scored runs or take wickets or whatever. But for you, that wasn't the case for various reasons. So take us back, Paul. What are your memories from that day 28 years ago when you made your test debut for Australia?
Yeah, it was all a whirlwind at the time. We'd been away. We'd had a first test. We went away on a tour game where we played India A. I did okay in that game. Paul Rifle, ironically, got injured after that first test in Chennai. There was a spot became available. They were toying actually between playing an extra spinner. So we already had Warne and Robertson on the side, and Stuart McGill was on that tour. So we're umming and ahhing about actually playing three spinners and utilising Greg Blewett as that open the bowling, the extra seamer option. So they ended up going for myself. I'm sure they regret that now because poor old Bluey ended up opening the bowling anyway with a second year ball. But it was just a whirlwind. He had been presented with cap by Mark Taylor. We didn't have the elaborate ceremonies that the players have got these days, but still to get that from Mark Taylor, someone we all respect, and I certainly did, was quite a thrill. And then getting the chance to get out there and get into it was brilliant. Unfortunately, the first spell was pretty obvious that I'd done damage to my groin. Managed to get, I think it was a second spell out, but at the point it was literally, I think it was dragging one leg by that stage of the injury I had. And not the most popular person in the team at the time, because obviously we were going for quite a few runs and we needed that bowler, and I was sitting on the sidelines, which is one thing I remember. And it used to look back and could have done it differently, and I don't think I could have. It was just, it is what it is. You get injured, and interesting test matches. Most of them were at that time, particularly when you're travelling. It was the one neutral, one home umpire, which is always a challenge, particularly on the subcontinent. Sarab Ganguly was the hero of Calcutta, or the prince of Calcutta, as he was often called, with Azruddin playing on that side. And so, fair to say, I think I described Azruddin, I think got 100. I think he got, we call it 6 for 100, 150 his innings was, I think it was. That's how many times we felt we had him out. But yeah, we just, Sarab Ganguly got some wickets. Some might suggest with the year of DRS, he wouldn't have actually been able to get verified, but there you go. So it was a tough one for us. Javigal Srinath, fell enough, he's now a match referee. Javigal was the man of the match in that test, as he keeps reminding me. But he was just phenomenal. He ripped us apart at the top of the order in one of the innings, and that pretty much was the test match. They just dominated, whether it's with bat or ball. And so I remember that was a bit of a whirlwind, but yeah, India just dominated us. We weren't helped by the officiating, Jack, to say the least, over the course of that game. And I became a trivia piece, as you mentioned before. If everyone who follows along in sports trivia at a local sporting club, well, if you ever find out which test cricketer's not got he played a test but hasn't got a stat, well, you're talking to him, because not out both times, didn't take a catch and didn't get a wicket. So that's my claim to fame, and I'll stick with it. It's about the only claim to fame I've got. My interview with you now has probably gone longer than my 12 overs for Australia. So, so as is often the joke in our household. So, I mean, look, I always look back at it, and the fondness is that I got a chance to play. I look at it now. If I'd stayed fit, I might have got a couple of tests, that one and the next one. You look at the players that weren't on that tour. Jason was one of them. Diz was one of them. Brett Lee had not quite come on the scene. Glenn McGrath was injured. Damien Fleming was injured. Andy Bickle didn't get on that tour. So you look at those and you go, and Paul Rifle got injured in the first test. So I'm a realist. I did realise that probably Michael Casper, which was doing a line of work in that test series, was phenomenal. I thought, you know what, after this third test, there's pretty much a chance that I was never going to play again anyway, unless there was a lot of injuries. And I did play Australia A and other stuff after that. But it's disappointing I got injured. Would have loved to just play the game like everybody else could, and walk away with one, maybe two. But I said I'm blessed that I actually got a chance to play one at all, particularly in that era, as you've mentioned before. So I haven't got really anything to complain about, mate. It was what it was. Nothing I can do about it. And there you go.
Yeah, I suppose it's just it's the same with Peter George when I interviewed him, Paul, about that test he played against India in 2010, and he got Sachin Tendulkar out on 200.
Yes.
He said, I was happy to get him out. Anyone who can get Sachin out, that's, wonderful thing to do. Not when he's on 200 odd, as he was in that test, but still a great thing and a great moment to remember. But even he said, I was just grateful for the opportunity and the experience, to play. And as you reiterated there, Paul, it was what it was. It is what it is. But, you can firmly say until you're no longer on this earth that I was fortunate enough to play Test cricket for Australia and be a part of that club. But having a look at the team, that played in that test, you had Slater, Taylor, Blewett, the War brothers, a young Ricky Ponting, Healy, the great Shane Warne, yourself.
I'm the odd one out there, mate. I always say that. There's one odd one out of that side. Yeah.
Yes.
So, as I said, look at that side, and there you go. That's and I said, and the players that weren't there, who were injured, Diz, McGrath, two of the greats. The fact that I got a chance, Pistol in a different era, phenomenal umpire, great, just an amazing career. Pistol in a different era would have played maybe twice as many tests, if not more. Just a phenomenal cricketer, and as I said, an outstanding umpire as well.
Yes, and obviously I mentioned Shane Warne there, and see if people can see the video version. They can see a poster that he signed when I went to his book signing
Yep.
in Adelaide in 2018 and met the great man, as so many people did. You got to play with him in this test match that you played, but also in one-day cricket a bit as well.
Yep.
What was it about Warnie that made him so special than any other cricketer that you would have seen in your time, Blocker?
It's often spoken about. It's just a special ability he had, undeniable self-belief, confidence in what he was doing. He just had the potential to grab the moment, more so, I think, than any cricketer I played with, definitely. I was lucky enough, actually, during the Carlton United series prior to that test tour of India, we played against South Africa and New Zealand. He actually captained, I'm going to say, 2 or 3 games on that particular series when Steve Waugh was injured. So I was actually lucky enough, just in my 11 games, I was lucky to be captained by not just Steve Waugh, but also Mark Taylor in Test cricket, but also Shane Warne in one-day cricket. And it is true. His ability as a captain was phenomenal. He was an outstanding captain, outstanding teammate, but as said, that ability to take the game by the scruff of the neck and take on the moment that was required. That was his ability as a player, very special. And everything's been written and said about Warnie is 100% right. Sorely missed. You still can't quite get your head around the fact he's not around with us anymore. But yeah, his ability as a player on and off the field was just phenomenal. Yeah, sensational.
Yes, and especially in that series against India, he had a pretty good battle with Sachin Tendulkar for that series. And what was it like, watching the other team? You had great players. That Indian side had some good players, like you mentioned, Ganguly and Tendulkar and co.
Yeah, Dravid, VVS Lakshman,
Dravid,
Srinath. I mean, they had a phenomenal side. I mean, in their own conditions, they were like they should be, tough to beat. And you talk about Warne against Tendulkar. I remember the first test, which I was I was part of the 12th, 13th, 14th band crew, and I remember he got rolled Dravid out on a ball that spat, and he and Healy took a great catch. We thought we're in the game here. Warne was bowling the footmarks. Tendulkar's come out, hit his first ball for 6. Just phenomenal. In the same spot. Obviously, Tendulkar had been watching. Dravid is a great player. He just got out to this ripper that Healy's taken, and the one memory from that is that Tendulkar took it upon himself to then put it straight back onto us by having it going literally bang straight back over the fence for 6, which was just phenomenal when you saw it live. And that were the things. And in that particular era, when you talk about Georgie getting Tendulkar out, that was the era then that I think Tendulkar got something like, between Test cricket and one-day cricket against us, something like a half a dozen or 700s against us across the course of a couple of months. He was just in phenomenal form. No one could get him out. In fact, most of the time, was just getting him off strike. Just get him off strike, put him down the other end, and see if he can get the other guys out. He just was nearly unbeatable at that stage, Tendulkar. He was just a phenomenal player.
Yes, and when I asked Peter George about that, getting them out in that, he said, well, it's a dream come true to get him out when he got him out in that test match that he played in 2010. But he also said, it's more like you want to watch him bat and see, how he operates in that, but you're trying to get him out at the same time. So trying to balance that. But he was a special cricketer, no doubt, as was Warnie. But, being a part of that dressing room, and people said, oh, what's it like being in the Australian test team dressing room? Or is it different to other dressing rooms in cricket? So what was that like when you first entered that test team and in that environment? Obviously, we'll talk about the one-day cricket a bit later because you played one-day cricket before that test match. But what was it like entering that room where these great cricketers assemble and talk about how you're going to go about winning a test match or a series? What was that like?
Look, it was better than probably I would have expected, and the one-day stuff helped me because I was in the one-day side with most of those players in the squad that went to India in '98. So getting on the plane, and the fact it was a tour as well, so I wasn't coming into a test at home where I'm flying in, I'm playing a game, I'm having to get to know them really quickly. I had the advantage of flying to the venue, coming a couple of tour games, test match tour games. So it was, if like a normal tour where we had tour games as well as the test matches. So there was a period of time we could get to know each other better, particularly people like myself. I think Adam Dale, Darren Lee and myself, we'd all been on the one-day side together. So we sort of came into that side knowing a lot of these players anyway, which was great. But the fact that we had an extended period of time because it was a tour made that a lot easier as well. So for all of those guys that I toured with, I got along really well then and since, I think because you had that extended period of time. So I was actually quite lucky. I can see where it can get clunky when you come in not really knowing them and coming into a test match at home and you got to do it really quickly. So I had that experience lead-in time, which certainly helped all of us.
Yes, definitely. And it's just like no different to any other dressing room, I suppose. It's just 11 guys playing cricket and having a bit of banter and a bit of fun, but also wanting to win. And that's what made that team so competitive in that dominant period of Australian cricket.
It's different to a club side or a state side because you obviously spend so much time together. So in this case, guys that played a long time for Australia spent a lot of time together, but some of us came in and out of the side no. So it's different from the point of view you don't do pre-season, you don't get to know these people inside out. It's different, but the fact you're touring for a period of time makes that a bit easier to infiltrate other people into the mix.
Yes, definitely. Now, Paul, many current and former Australian Test cricketers have a different perspective when it comes to the baggy green and playing Test cricket for Australia, what it means to them. What does it mean to you, Paul? What does it mean? What does the baggy green mean to you, and playing Test cricket for Australia mean to you?
It means a lot of things. I mean, it's a realisation of a dream that you wanted as a kid to play for Australia. As you mentioned before, I got to play one-day cricket before Test, and it's just as important then. The one-day side of things as well as Test. Test is the pinnacle. So for me, it's like, even though it was brief, the fact that I achieved the pinnacle in our sport, in our country, to reach the national team and play at that level. So to be able to achieve that, to me, was like, it's not something that happens overnight. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. A lot of people are part of that journey with you. And to be able to do that, it's something obviously myself and my family are very proud about to this day. And I suppose in a way, it's just you're part of that tradition, you're part of that club. As you said, it's a pretty unique club. Over the 150, 60 years of Test cricket, there's still only less than 500 have done it. So that's a pretty cool club to be part of. But again, it sort of comes back to that dream realised. You've reached the pinnacle of what we do in our sport from a male perspective in our country, and yes, that's sort of where it always comes back to. And I think, as I said to someone recently, it's that when kids see that and feel that cap, you can just see that the spark in people's eyes when they see it, that I'd like to do that. And I think it's one of those pieces of clothing we've got in this country in terms of sport. It's just it's hard to put into words, and it obviously means a lot to a lot of people. And the fact that I had a chance to wear that, though very briefly, it's one of those things that you can't forget.
Yes, definitely. That's very well summed up there, Paul. And I suppose it's in nice, pristine condition, no sweat marks or some baggy greens are a bit ugly. Steve Worsley rotted off his head. By the end of his career.
No, mine's still in pretty good nick, mate. So as you can imagine, it's probably had more time spent on other people's heads than mine over the years since '98. But with people trying it on, but it's in pretty good nick, mate. It's, as you can imagine. So, yeah.
Yes, definitely. Proudly on display.
Yeah, it is. It's on display. So it's not one of those things I keep away in the cupboard. It's there as part of other things I've sort of gathered over time, whether that be from playing or umpiring. So yeah, pride of place.
Yes, definitely. You mentioned one-day cricket there, Paul, and let's talk about the ODI career, because I suppose in a fortunate way you were lucky enough to play one-day cricket, and to play 11 games plus a test match, so 12 all up, is pretty good when you look at it from that perspective. And it was a bit longer than your test career, so that's a positive, I suppose. So it was against New Zealand in 1997, where you made your debut in one-day cricket, and it was a tri-series that summer with New Zealand and South Africa, which is a bit of a rarity these days, but back then it was popular tri-series, and one-day cricket was sort of booming and it was popular in Australia, whereas now, with the current situation in cricket, it's not sort of doing as well as it would have hoped. But take us back, Paul, to that ODI debut against New Zealand. What are your memories from entering that Australian side for the first time, being picked out of state cricket to finally play for the national team?
Yeah, it was one sort of a few days before that game. We had Australia versus Australia A at the SCG, and we had the situation. Adam Gilchrist was playing for Australia, and we had Ian Healy playing for us for the Australia A side. So we had the first in-your-face moment where the hero is now playing for the second team, and Adam, who obviously is going to go down as one of the greats of all time, was selected as the one-day keeper. So we had that game, and during that game, I actually did okay in that game. It was someone on the fence. It was down at fine leg towards the end of the game. Someone mentioned congratulations, you're in the Australian team. So someone from the crowd had heard it on the radio. It was announced the squad for the next batch of games for Australia, and my name was in that list. So I actually found out from someone on the fence, which was pretty cool. So I had time to digest the fact that it was going to happen. Obviously, I was going to get interviewed after the game, probably about that selection. But then going into the camp, a bit like going back to you mentioned before about going into the side. So for me, that was my introduction to the Australian team. There was a few changes, so due to either selection, due to a form or fitness. So here I was brought into the Australian team. From relative obscurity, even though I'd done okay domestically, but I sort of came from left field to get selected. So yeah, I was sort of meeting some people potentially. I'm trying to think now, I'd only met once or twice before, and also now I'm playing with him from the Australian side. And Steve Waugh was captain, and Steve was great. Steve said, look, you've been selected, that's good enough for me. Just go and just do what you've been doing. Simple instructions and exactly what a debutant needs in that instance. And he did the same thing with a lot of players when they first came in, that ultimately, as far as they're concerned, if you're being selected for this side, you're good enough. That was the only bit of comments you needed. So for me, it was knowing that people on that side thought I deserved to, back me 100%, believed I should be there, believed in what I did. It was sort of part of the planning and for the next particular game and what we're going to be about. So yeah, that was the great part. And by the way, I'm walking into a side that was a pretty good side, but having said that, the other two sides we were playing, South Africa and New Zealand, were very, very good one-day teams as well. So it was international cricket at the highest order, particularly at white ball level. So I just remember, just trying to soak in the atmosphere of the crowd and the MCG debut. I mean, you look back at it now, my only test at Calcutta and my first one day at the MCG are two iconic venues. So I got quite lucky from that point of view. Bit different some of the umpiring ones we'll talk about shortly. So yeah, that was pretty cool. So just soaking that in. One of my mates from cricket was a guy called Trent Park, a very well-known photographer, world-famous photographer's week in one of the newspapers. And he's a mate with Anthony Stewart, who famously got a hat-trick for Australia. He's another Newcastle boy. He got a hat-trick at the MCG against Pakistan. And all he said to me was, when you get your first wicket, can you give me a celebration so I can get a great photo? And that's all I remember from that game. And I'm not sure what I did, but he got a photo out of it and away we went. But I think it was just a day, Jack, was just soaking the day. And I think in a way, again, that realisation that, hey, actually, I'm playing for Australia. How good's this? And playing with some mates that I'd come through the ranks. Adam Gilchrist is someone I've known since we were 18. He's from Lismore, I'm from Newcastle. We played against each other. Ironically, I was playing for Newcastle under 19s, and he just moved to Sydney, and we played against each other up in Newcastle. It's the first time we played against each other, and we were mates from that point forward. So to play with a couple of guys on that side I knew from my academy days, Ricky Ponting being another one, that certainly helped as well. So it was cool. It was a great day. And we won, which is even better.
Yes. We actually performed well. You took 3 wickets in the 10 overs, and Australia won the game, and then Australia went on to win the whole tri-series. They played South Africa in the final, which were 3 finals, and they won 2 of them, and South Africa won 1. So
they won the first one. We came back to win 2-1 in the next 2 games in Sydney, famously. We lost the first one in MCG. It was famously Jeff Marsh, the coach, put in the very now famous combination of Mark Waugh and Adam Gilchrist as opening batters. That was that series where the decision was made that Adam was going to go to the top of the order with Mark, and the rest is history. Yeah, what a phenomenal combination those two were. And Adam got 100 in the second game in Sydney, and the rest is history. And Mark's a phenomenal player, and that combination was so good for Australia over many years, as we all know. So that was that series that decision was made. So outstanding. So it was a great series to be part of. As I said, I look back and even look at the teams we played against, New Zealand and South Africa were on paper, and a lot of the South African guys became legends in their country, and they were young guys then. So it was quite a young team overall. I think there was a couple of older heads, but overall the South African side and New Zealand side were sort of stacked with guys who were just in the first couple of years of their long careers. So it was a great series to be part of, actually.
Yes, especially back then with a tri-series, which is a bit of a
Yeah.
was a staple of Australian summers years gone by, and now
Yes.
it's sort of drifted away. I think the last tri-series was 2014-15 in Australia. That was before the World Cup.
Yeah, that'd probably be right. I mean, I think the landscape we're in now, T20 cricket didn't exist back in 97, 98. So now with T20s, it's very difficult now to have tri-series. Now, there's been a tri-series T20 series. I actually umpired that. That was New Zealand, Australia, England. I think that might be the last. But there's always a few of those floating around sometimes. But now with T20s, it makes it very difficult now to do ODI tri-series, which is a pity because, as you said, that there was some fantastic series back then.
Yes, definitely. And then your last ODI was against New Zealand in 98 in Auckland. So perfect symmetry. Started against New Zealand, ended against New Zealand.
Yeah, correct.
What are your memories from that last ODI that you played? Did you know that would be your last game?
No, because back I was selected for the Test Tour in '98, and then there was a one day series at the back of that, and then there was another series in Sharjah following that. So I was currently entrenched in the one day side in New Zealand. So there was every chance. In fact, I was going to be selected for the one day component after the '98 Test Tour. And of course, I got injured in that. So I suppose, just like my Test career, there was every chance that getting out of the side meant it was going to be pretty tough to get back in, as I said, with the number of players that were injured at the time. So I didn't know that was going to be my last game, but also getting injured in '98 was a double whammy for me because that was the Test career over, and pretty much my one day career was probably done because there were too many good players floating around. So I was a chance for the '98 Commonwealth Games. I was injured. I couldn't get back in time. And then the '99 World Cup, I would have been a contender for that, but missed out on selection for that. And that was pretty much me done. So my recollection from Auckland was full house, Australia, New Zealand, everything you thought it would be and more. I was positioned in the field in front of the old terrace there at Eden Park, the wooden terrace. So my couple of times the game was stopped because I had a fruit salad around me when the Mexican wave went up, or the wave went up, I was dosed with fruit and everything you can think of. And this is like game started about 10:30 in the morning, and this was going on. We fielded first. So yeah, I remember that vividly. That I copped a lot because I was standing in front of the hill. So that was fun, but it was quite funny seeing me surrounded by all this fruit, and full fruit, by the way. Some of it wasn't touched, so I didn't get hit with any, but it was pretty close to being hit. So yeah, I remember it was just a full-on game, typical Australian New Zealand affair at a great iconic stadium, Eden Park, and yeah, I think we ended up 2-2. It was unusually a 4-match series, and we ended up 2-2 at the end of the 4-match series. Yeah.
Yes, well, it's always a good battle with Australia and New Zealand, and we'll probably see that this summer for the Test series. 4 Test matches, and New Zealand coming off of a good win over England.
Yes.
So it could be an interesting series between Australia and New Zealand. But it's always been a good rivalry over the years. That's for sure. Now that's the talking about yourself bit done, Paul. Let's get into this cricket discussion. I chose some topics to talk about and discuss. And I thought for our topic for this cricket discussion, Paul, we'll talk about all things umpiring, seeing that you're an expert in umpiring matters. And obviously, post-playing, you went on that umpiring journey, as many former players have, which seems to be, increasing year by year, that former international players are deciding to take up umpiring. And we see that at the ICC level. Quite a few on the panel, match referees as well, are former players. And obviously you've retired from international cricket now in terms of umpiring, but you still freelance around the world in these T20 leagues umpiring. You were in the States recently for Major League Cricket, which was good experience to witness cricket in America, which seems to be growing every year as we look to the LA Olympics in 2028, when cricket will be played there. And as I mentioned before, Paul, that you're the fourth umpire that we've had on the podcast. Obviously, Daryl Harper, Mary Walden, and Peter George are the others. So it's always good to have an umpire on to talk about umpiring matters and for our listeners to understand the role of umpiring in cricket, but also understand some of the misconceptions and get a bit of a feeling for what umpires actually do and how the game's officiated, which is important in all sports, but more so in cricket. It's quite a hard task to do with the laws and dealing with people's disagreements and, all the grey areas the game has. But we've seen in cricket umpiring over the years, Paul, that it's changed dramatically with technology, DRS, and the way the game's umpired at international level, but also grassroots as well. So how do you assess the current state of umpiring within cricket today, Paul? Do you think it's in a good place, or do you think it's sort of gone backwards a little bit?
I think overall umpiring's in a good place. I think technology has improved the standards of umpiring. What it's firstly done is proven how good umpires actually have been and are. But secondly, it's also improved umpiring because you've now got technology that assists you. So at the end of the day, DRS and the technology assists the umpire at any given point. It's going to prove you got something right, wrong, whatever it might be. It actually improves the standard of umpiring. So at international level, in theory, it's actually improved the standard of umpiring. The challenge is at grassroots level and even state level is that we don't have DRS. So I think in a way, a lot of club cricketers and maybe even first-class state cricketers without DRS, you can remember that we don't have DRS. There's no such thing as umpire score. It's just an umpire's decision. So the state of umpiring, I think, is going well, but also you've got to marry that up, as I said, with the fact that it's only certain types of cricket that have got technology available to us, and the other ones we don't. And again, the umpiring at that level has got better because the technology available to umpires has assisted them in being better when they actually assess their own performances, if that makes sense. So I think it's been a good thing for the game, and it'll continue to be a good thing for the game, no matter what sport you're in.
Yes, definitely. And I interviewed Daryl Harper. He was at the early years of DRS.
Yes, he was,
2008, and he said it was just a little TV screen and not really good pictures and grainy and all that stuff. But it's completely changed now with 4K and high definition and all that stuff as well. Obviously, it does change your perception in terms of decision-making, Paul. How did you find when you went from umpiring international cricket with DRS to then going back to domestic cricket where you didn't have DRS? Did that change your decision-making whatsoever? Like giving LBWs out and then on ball tracking, okay, it's hitting the stumps, whereas in domestic cricket, probably won't be hitting the stumps, that sort of different sort of perspective?
No. The best way to be, certainly we find, is you just umpire the game as you umpire the game. So you call it as you see it and hear it, and that's the simplistic and easiest way of going about it as an umpire. When I mentioned the technology before, is that if you're in the game itself, you might think it's bounced a little bit more or a little bit less, and technology is showing you the beauty of it is actually showing the tracking on that ball to give you an accurate picture of where that's going on to hit, if that makes sense, or where it's impacting the pad But ultimately, you're just calling the game as you see it and as you hear it. And if you do that, you're going to get the occasional one wrong. Welcome to the human race. No one's perfect. No one's getting 100%. But you don't. I didn't feel as though I tried to change anything I did based on whether it was technology or not. End of the day, technology was there. As I don't see it as a security blanket, but ultimately it's a determinant factor if need be. If the players think it's closer or they might hear something I don't. You see a lot of the ones where there's a fine edge or a feather that the standing umpire at the bowler's end is not hearing it. Guy at square leg doesn't hear anything. One or two players hear something and they go upstairs and lo and behold, there's a spike. End of the day, batter thought he might have got away with that in the state game, but technology proves it otherwise. So you've only called that the way you've seen it and heard it, and everyone just cracks on. That's just life. And players at first class will understand that we just don't have that technology, and you roll with the punches.
Yes. How about dealing with the players in terms of them not being happy on the field? The most famous one that you had, the interaction with Tim Payne during the India series in 2020-21 at the SCG, or even before that in Melbourne as well in the previous test. But in Sydney, I wasn't happy with a particular decision. And I think you said on the stump mics, "I'm not the third umpire, mate." To make the decision. So how do you go about dealing with that sort of conflict and trying to make the players understand about the technology and why the decision was made the way it was?
Yeah, I mean, the one with Tim, fun enough, wasn't as serious as people made it out to be. It just happened to be near a stump mic. And that was the mistake, I suppose, in the way he made at the time. But I think we players all knew if you did that, you get fined, and that's what happened. But it actually came from that Melbourne test. So I was TV umpire, and I gave him out upstairs because there was a bat and ball next to each other with a spike. Now, he's convinced he hasn't hit it. And technology, as we explained to him at the time, technology, if we see that as a TV umpire, that's out. So the discussion we had in Sydney was based, as I said to him, well, I was actually the standing umpire this time. I'd made a decision which I felt was a correct decision, and it wasn't. There was a couple of noises, but those noises weren't bat on ball, so that was overturned. I remember at the time, based on the spike or the lack of spike. At the time, the ball went past the bat. So Tim was a bit upset the fact that obviously I was TV umpire and gave it out in Melbourne, but this TV umpire isn't assisting my decision in on field in Sydney. So in that instance, it's just a matter of explaining to him that what the differences are. I mean, as we've seen with RTS, it's not the most reliable piece of technology we've ever had. Hawkeye, I would say straight out, because I'm now a specialist TV umpire these days, the Hawkeye technology is better, cleaner, can filter out those noises, etc. But at that time, it's just explained to the players that, well, the TV umpire is not convinced that that's conclusive evidence, then we move on. So it's trying to explain in simple terms, Jack, no more than that. And again, for Tim's particular issue it was actually the game before where I gave him out, but it was based on the information we were given, and the information tells us it's out. Whether he's hit it or not, he's convinced he's hit it, is not really there, neither here nor there for us. We just call it as we see it.
Yeah, definitely. And we've noticed that with the ICC in terms of World Cups and tournaments, they have improved technology, and we're seeing more and more innovations with smart replays and faster decisions that have been made. Using ball tracking to predict where the ball has gone above the head or above the waist of a batter. And we're seeing that more and more as ICC tournaments go on and on. And now with you being a specialist TV umpire, which we've been talking about in the game for many years now, but obviously still yet to roll that out at international level. And you just came back from the States with Major League Cricket, where you've done that role. What sort of a difference that's made to your umpiring, and is it something that we should consider going forward, having specialist TV umpires who are trained in the technology, who understand how the technology works, how to make decisions that are more precise and more accurate to an extent than the current system that we have at the moment, where you ask an on-field umpire to become a third umpire, and then it's a bit of a difficult thing to try and do.
Yeah, well, I'll try and summarize it. Every umpire that is trained in the technology, so every umpire internationally, domestically, if they're going to operate under technology, they're trained. So everyone's trained. So I'm not necessarily trained more than anybody else. But the part of it is that it's like anything else. You get in a rhythm. So the unnatural part of our sport, you get in other sports as well, but the unnatural part of our sport is, and I think the lack of fairness for umpires in our sport is that they're training and practicing to be TV umpire for one game every 3 months. It's madness, really. I'll be quite honest with this. It's madness that we think we'll give them all this training and practice, and they get one international game today, and they're not doing another one for 3 months or 2 months. That doesn't make any sense. So the reason why specialist TV umpires are required and should happen is because unless the administrators are going to appoint umpires in the TV umpires chair for 3 or 4 games in a row, which makes more sense. You get continuity, you get a rhythm, just like umpiring, just like playing. If you're not going to do that, well, you're actually doing the game and the umpire a disservice, because they're putting all their eggs in that one basket for one game every 2 or 3 months. So the reason why specialist TV umpiring works is it's continuity, it's rhythm, it's, yes, getting used to the technology and knowing it inside out, working with 1 or 2 directors only, generally, maybe 1. So they get used to the way you work and you get used to the way they work. You work with their producers, your assistant directors, the whole staff. So the whole thing, that you become part of the production, you get part of the broadcast. And the one part I'd say about specialist TV umpires, and the more you do it. So in the BBL last year, we tried to appoint people to 2 or 3 games in a row. And what you naturally see, Jack, over that time is the efficiency. It's the efficiency in decision-making gets better each game they do. They're not making errors. You certainly hope they don't. But there's not a lot of errors in the TV umpire's box, and there shouldn't be. But what you do see is the efficiency in decision-making gets better and better and better as the games go on. And specialist TV umpires, and the stats we've got out of MLC and the ILT 20, where we used smart replay last year, we're seeing stats now showing that decisions are taking a shorter period of time to make. Even if it wasn't smart replay, which is fast, the normal DRS, we're seeing decisions made in better time, more efficiently, and with less words, if that makes sense. We're getting to the right decision in a faster way. So going back to it, umpires are trained in it, but if they only get a chance to do it once in a while, it's very clunky. But all umpires will tell you, the more they get a chance to sit in that chair, the better they get. So it does make sense, really, if you've got a team of 5 or 6 specialist TV umpires around the world, it makes more sense to have them doing it than an umpire jumping in and out from the field. So in a series, Jack, you might be appointed to the 3 tests on field, and someone else is appointed to do all 3 as a TV umpire, whatever it might look like. But at least, and I know from an umpire's perspective, you don't mind being on field because you've got more control and you've got more of a rhythm to be there instead of doing the odd game as a TV umpire. So, and to be honest with you, at the moment, the stats are showing we're seeing more mistakes in the TV umpire's box now than we've ever seen, and they train more than they ever have. So we've got this sort of, it's not gelling, so they're doing a lot more practice, but they're actually seeing more errors. So there has to be a reason for that. And I think it does, certainly my experience, comes down to the fact that they don't get a chance to do consecutive games. So they don't get in a rhythm. And it becomes a bit of a weird world to be sitting there and all of a sudden you're back on field again next game. So in a way, the models work okay, but it could work a lot better if administrators start thinking a bit more strategically about it. But Jack, I don't think in the international world it's going to change much. They just don't see the reason why they should go down that path, even though we've shown in a couple of, or 2 or 3 of these competitions that it works really well.
Yeah. It's always that willingness to change. Cricket's always that particular sport that doesn't really like to change all that much. It's sort of bound by traditions, or we've done it this way for years, and we're going to keep doing it for years. Or do you think it's, if they do roll it out in international cricket, do you think the current, umpires who want to umpire just want to do on the field rather than, okay, from now on, you are going to be a TV umpire and you're going to train in the technology and you're going to do a series and you're just going to be, doing the TV stuff rather than being on field? Do you think that will make umpires say, well, hang on, I want to be on the field as well, and I want to experience that side of umpiring as well? Do you think if it does happen, do you think umpires will be a bit up in arms about that, or they just say, okay, we just have to adapt with it and roll with the punches, I suppose?
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could have a hybrid. You could have a hybrid method where you could have some umpires that are still currently umpiring on field that they might get appointed to the odd series just as TV umpire. You could still do that. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. But it also having as I said, it might only be 3 or 4 people being specialists, and you might find some umpires are far, and there are, I can tell you now at international level, they're far more comfortable being on field. And it generally comes down to those that English is not their first language. So it's not to say that they're not very good TV, and they are, but some are far more comfortable with being on field and being the TV umpire's chair. and then you get others that want to do both. So in a way, you can have a system where you've got umpires at the moment, as you mentioned before, that with retirement, is there a way of keeping those people involved in the sport as a specialist TV umpire? Like Murray Erasmus left a couple of years ago. If Rod Tucker, whenever that happens in the next year or so, guys that are coming out of the game, Richard Illingworth, they're all coming towards the end of their careers. Would that be something they might want to do post their elite umpiring career? So you could have a situation, you could have 3 or 4 guys that do it all the time, and you might have 2 or 3 of your best TV umpires are also very good on-field umpires that might do the odd series just as a TV umpire when the schedule's so busy that you can't get there's too many games for those 4 specialists to get across. So I think there's a way you can do it. It's just a matter, as you said before, and there's been a paper written on this, funnily enough, by Simon Taufel 10 years ago. He wrote a paper on this to the ICC to say, look, specialist TV umpires is where our sport's headed. And here we are in 2026, that the only competitions, funnily enough, are the ones that Simon's involved in, are the ones we've got them. Internationally, we still haven't done it yet. But what Simon wrote about and the theory behind it is actually 100% right. As that as a sport, we're going to start thinking about it, because as you've seen, we've got so many 2020 competitions. There's so much cricket being played. We're spreading umpires too thinly across the world. And there needs to be a situation. If you want continuity and to do this properly, having specialist people in those roles just makes sense. Common sense.
Yes, no, definitely. Absolutely. And do you think we need more transparency in terms of educating fans about why a decision was made? Because we've seen over the years, Paul, that, dare I say it, what happened at Lords in 2023 with Bairstow and Carey, the stumping,
yep.
and as the Mitchell Stark's catch as well. Do you think we need more transparency when it comes to those? Because people at the time said, Starkey's catch was fair. And okay, yeah, he did use his arms to steady himself and balance and all that stuff. But probably in years gone by, that probably wasn't picked up as much until one umpire actually looked at it closely and said, maybe that's set a precedence probably. And I've noticed that fielders have probably changed their catching techniques because of that after that. So do you think we need more transparency when it comes to decisions that are made and contentious ones like those ones I mentioned, and also running out the non-striker and all the other things, and people tag the spirit of cricket alongside that as well, which they did at the time.
Yeah.
So what's your point on that as well, Paul, in terms of the transparency and making people understand why the decision was made and this is how we came to it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go to your last point about spirit of cricket. That gets trotted out when something suits others, and the spirit of cricket's the spirit of cricket, but the laws are the laws. You got to play the game the right way in the spirit, of course. But that one always amuses me because often it comes out and it's often trotted out by people where it suits them. But at the end of the day, if it's in the law, it's in the law. About the transparency, it really depends on the TV umpire you have. So as the TV umpire, as you're going through that decision, the explanation and the reason why you've made that decision can be done live to air. The one thing we don't do well as a sport, and it's a frustration, is taking a leaf out of some other sports, i.e. like the NRL. Don't replicate the NRL, but there are other sports that come out on a Monday morning and talk about a couple of the contentious decisions that have happened on the weekend, whether it's a bunker decision or whether it's an on-field decision by a referee. We don't get ahead of the curve when something's happened, and particularly if whether the umpire's got it right or wrong, but ultimately most of the time the umpire's got it right. But we never explain to the public why. So it becomes a controversy. It's the trotted out line during the BBL or other competitions that, controversy last night. And when you look at it and go, that's not controversial, that's a correct decision made by the TV umpire or the on-field umpire. So we should be getting ahead of the game by saying, this happened last night, this is the reason why it was decided, bang, done. Takes all the oxygen out of it. But you as a supporter, follower, you might have watched that game for the first time, read and go, okay, that's the reason why. So you might not get much of a chance live to air, but maybe post-game or the next day, putting something out saying, well, this has happened last night, this is the reason why. And it's normally a blue moon, a decision or a law that doesn't come up very often. And with the catch law, Jack, be honest, it's pretty simple. It's whether you take control of the catch and the control of your movement. And I wouldn't want to see that law change because at the moment, funnily enough, it's pretty clear cut. And if you start to dabble in, and if you start to put a grey area in there about what the movement looks like, and all of a sudden you've got Pandora's box. So the Mitchell Starc one was clear. He didn't have. He was using the ball to control his movement, which meant that, mate, that's on the ground, that's not out. And I think Murray Erasmus was the TV umpire, and the great thing was Murray explained that on the coverage. I think either when he was making the decision or later on, he was interviewed and explained it. So I'm at your point. I agree with what you're saying, is that we need to be better at that, because what it does is it actually educates. Our role is not just to do our job, it also is to educate someone, particularly talk about the American market. Well, I could be talking to people who've never watched a game of cricket in their life. They don't know what this game's all about. They're really confused about a game that has no result after 5 days, let alone a 2020 game that they've never seen before. So we've got a responsibility as sport to educate, and being transparent probably means us just explaining it in a better way than we do. Because often in cricket, there is just total silence and no one talks about it, and it drags on when you can probably nip it in the bud the next morning.
Yes, definitely. And it's only when something like the stumping at Lords or the Stark catch, or in the World Cup in 2023 when Bangladesh appealed for timeout with Angela Matthews, and I think it was Adrian Holdstock that had to come out of the innings break and explain why the decision was made. He was the one that was doing that.
Yeah, which by the way, Jack, he was fourth umpire. It's not his role. The fourth umpire is not the one who should be explained to the world why someone was timed out. There's 2 on-field umpires. They're the ones who should be interviewed, and that's the one thing that did come out of that one as a profession, is that's not the fourth umpire's job. That's been made by TV and the 2 guys on field. Well, you're the guys who got to make that decision, not the fourthie. So that was one thing that came out of that. I was at that World Cup, and yeah, I wouldn't want any fourth umpire, even myself. It's not our job to be explaining to the world what was decided. That's the headquarters. That's the guys on the field who've made that decision.
Yeah. Do you think that with cricket being so, 3 different formats, different playing conditions, which are totally separate to the laws of the game, you think that we need to try and simplify the laws? And obviously they do that every time. The MCC, they update the laws all the time. Yep. But with all the international stuff, ICC playing conditions and all that, trying to read a different set of playing conditions for a format and trying to get your head around that as an umpire as well with the laws. Do you think it needs to be simplified a bit more, or less needs to be taken out? Stuff that doesn't need to be there can be removed? Or from your point of view, doing it for many years as you did, do you think that probably we need to look at that sort of slimlining the laws and playing conditions a bit, taking stuff that doesn't need to be there?
Well, it's interesting. Which ones do you take out? That's your first one. But since I started to now, they are more simplified in a way. The laws themselves, we just go to the laws first. The MCC Laws Committee have done a great job in simplifying, or it's probably the best way, modernising some of these laws based on how the game's now played. So in a way, they are more simplified now, or again, we use the word modernised now based on the game of cricket and how it's being played. So the other, as I said, the question is, well, which ones do you take out? And it's probably argued that when you go through it all, none of them you take out. It's just a matter, as you said, simplifying it. And then you said playing conditions take precedence once you bring those in, and the playing conditions are more to do with whether it's T20, club cricket, whether it's whatever the format is, they change those playing conditions accordingly. So in a way, I'd have to say that the Laws Committee have modernised those laws, and they're continuing to do so. So there's quite a large change, which all of us are getting used to now. Now the winter classes are going on in Australia, where October 1, the new laws come in, or the changes to the laws come in. I love how it's formulated in England, and they don't operate under these laws at the moment. So the English cricket season is still operating in the old laws. So they come in October 1, which is normally the Australian, South African, New Zealand seasons. So yeah, I think in a way they've done a pretty good job with that, but I think it's always evolving, Jack, because the game seems to change all the time. So in a way, there's been a recognition now that I think the laws will continue to change quite regularly based on how the players are playing under the current laws and how they're coached, and the skill level of these players and what they're doing can often be in front of the laws, if that makes sense. So it's trying to get the laws and trying to get it up to where the game's going from a playing perspective. So, yeah, I think in a way it's working okay, but I think you'll never get in line with the changes because the players and the coaches are so good at what they do that often sometimes you're playing catch up. But I think it's so far so good. But the first question I have for people, as I said at the top, is, well, which ones would you change? I mean, I think you're seeing it with bats. They're talking about, the willow. Now the recognition that, willow's a tree, and can we keep growing enough trees to have cricket bats? Well, what's our other alternative to make a cricket bat? So it actually has got to the modern world now that actually, these were designed years and years ago. Do we have enough product or trees to make these bats? So what other alternatives can we have? Cricket balls, how are they made? It doesn't say that it has to be leather, for instance, but what other alternatives can you have? So, yeah, I think in a way MCC is doing a really good job in trying to get ahead of the curve where it can.
Yes, it's important to adapt and evolve
Yeah.
as the years and the eras go on, and we've certainly seen that in this modern era. Compared to the era when you played, Paul, obviously last century, it's certainly changed a bit. But obviously you made the transition into umpiring from playing, and we're seeing quite a lot of former players do that at various levels of cricket and have gone on and do great things like yourself, international umpiring. Did that sort of fill a void for you, knowing that, okay, my international career for Australia was what it was, as we've discussed, and with umpiring, you get to travel the world and experience different cultures like you would when you play international cricket. So for you, did that sort of fill that void from your international career when you became an international umpire that, playing for your country's the greatest honor you'll ever have, but umpiring's the next best thing because you get to do what players do and travel the world and do the job that you love?
Filling a void. I mean, I was interested in coaching, so I'd done my tickets for that. I was interested, so I took that up alongside still playing after I left the first class scene. But umpiring was in the back of my mind. So I suppose in a way, I thought of it from a point of view that it wasn't something in Australia we did very, very well in regards to ex-players taking it on. Cricket Australia came up with that project panel, which Rod and Paul took up in 2002. So it's sort of in the back of my mind that it might be something the manager and I at the time decided, well, we'll put something forward to them. Yeah, it was around about 2005-06. 2005, we sort of started to intimate that we might be interested, and both Paul and Rod were just about selected on the normal national panel. So there was going to be a gap for a former player to take it up, and that's why I did. So in a way, it was a great way of staying involved, first and foremost. People talk about it's the best view on the house. Well, it is. You can't get a better view than standing there and not actually participating, but you're right there in the mix. But also being involved and in some way putting back into the game. But also, you know what? If you're going to be someone that's going to say something about umpiring, maybe it's stop putting your money where your mouth is and have a crack at it yourself. There's an element of that as well. So it was a mixture for me. But yeah, I think the one that's just staying involved in the game, and I look back now and I see a kid that started at 9 years of age, and here I am at 54, still involved in the game heavily. It's sort of hard to believe, but umpiring's allowed me to continue that journey. And I finished playing first class cricket at 32 it was. Yeah, 32. So the last 22 years has been umpiring and coaching, and I'm enormously blessed, and that'll continue for another, probably another 10 to 15 years, scarily enough. So, and guys at Cricket Australia who are referees, etc., those guys are in their 70s. So who knows how long I can do it. Steve Davis is heavily involved, and Davo's in his early to mid 70s, and a couple of other guys are as well. So when you see their involvement, so the possibilities there. So yeah, staying involved was a critical part of it. And it was, I suppose it is a void, but yeah, it's that involvement. I think that passion for the game. I wanted to be involved, but umpiring's a bit different. You're sort of involved with trying to at arm's length. Your dreams to go through a full day counting to six and doing nothing else, not making a decision. That'd be great. And yeah, you never get that, but that's your dream. But yeah, the being part of it's a huge a draw card to taking up umpiring once you finish playing.
Yes, it must have been, I don't know, but it must have been pretty difficult to probably step away from international umpiring, which you have for all sorts of reasons, which you will mention. But obviously now doing what you're doing is freelancing, sort of like what players do in T20 cricket, really going around the world and playing in these leagues. You're sort of leading the way when it comes to that with umpiring, that umpires could do this if they want to and choose when they want to work and whatever. So talk us through that decision, stepping away from international cricket, which is a great honor and a privilege. But also doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, people thought it was mad. I mean, I was on the doorstep of elite panel, but in a way, I'd gone through one marriage breakup. I had a daughter with my first marriage, and I had 2 young kids at home, and it was. I've been thinking about this for a couple of years before I made the decision that what's it going to look like, because the more I'm involved, the less I'm going to be at home, and I was already on the road for probably the best 4 or 5 months a year, probably longer if you count the domestic scene. So, it's either domestic travel, international travel, and when you're on the emerging panel or you're top of the list in Australia, like Sam Nagayski is at the moment, is that you're between 2 employers, the ICC and CA, basically. And so if you're not at home, you're away, if that makes sense. And at home being you're traveling around Australia. So I had to look at it from the point of view that what's the best chance of me being around more and seeing the kids grow up? And that was, I had to make a decision at some point about what that might look like. And then you have to be in the shop window as well. So I've done World Cups, I've done all the international stuff. So I've done a couple of these trips to the UAE for ILT20, and I'd already done a trip to MLC as well. So I'd already had 2 groups that were quite happy for me to do what I was doing for them. And the fact that I'd been on the national panel was fine by them. If I wanted to be freelance, they're okay with that. So the conversation started that, you know what, I might be able to earn, might be able to keep going and be employed, if you like, obviously contractually, from time to time with these events. So I put it out there, and it's eventually, so the decision came that Cricket Australia's contract system didn't allow anyone to do what I was doing, to go off during our season to go and do the LT20 while the BBL's on, etc. And I get that. So it didn't allow me to do that. So if ultimately I couldn't sign on. So my decision was to not necessarily retire from international cricket, yes, but I was resigning, if you like, from CA because the contract didn't allow me to do some of this other stuff. So I had to make a decision to go freelance. So I'm not retired from umpiring. I'm just, I've left I'm no longer full-time with CA. So I can now, and I know there's now 2 or 3 umpires now to come to the end of their career in other countries are doing what I'm doing. So I was the first umpire to do what I've done. Simon Taufel and Roshan Mahanama have been freelance referees at the ILT20, and Simon does the MLC. So I was the first umpire, if you like, to do this, freelance, and which is pretty cool. And now we've got, as I said, some other guys now seeing the benefit of potentially doing it, and I'll see where that goes for them. And there are more and more of these tournaments, Jack, appearing all over the place. Now Europe's got one starting end of August. I did the EU T20 in Belgium, started June. You've got Major League Cricket, you've got ILT20, you've got BPL, you've got PSL, you've got the South African competitions, and then you've got other minor ones being from time to time elsewhere. So there's opportunities out there, but you've got to be in the shop window to start with and then develop those relationships from there. So, again, it's pretty cool to be at the shop front, if you like, being the first person to do this, but I certainly won't be the last. I can see a lot more, particularly elite panel umpires that are coming out of what they're doing. They'll be looking for that sort of, potential to do 1 or 2 of those a year as well. So I think these leagues now are quite lucky. They're going to have enough umpires now of quality. They're going to be part of their competitions.
Yes, definitely. And it's a bit of a trend setter, Paul, setting the trend for umpires around the world.
Yeah, seem to be.
Leading the way. But obviously, looking back and obviously reflecting, you've been a part of World Cups and memorable matches in cricket. I can name a couple, obviously, during COVID. In Australia, being fortunate enough to umpire in Australia with India and England.
Yeah,
a couple of big things happened in those series, obviously. With Richard Pant and Scott Boland, who you were a part of both of those test matches, and watching those guys go about their business.
Yeah.
What was it like, witnessing great moments like that and being in the middle, obviously focusing on your job first and foremost as an umpire, but when the game finishes and you have a time to reflect and you're like, wow, that was pretty unreal to see what Rishabh Pant did, or for you, standing at Scott Boland's end when he took 6 for 7 on debut. It must have been amazing, especially MCG and a Boxing Day test as well.
Yeah, I mean, I got to umpire. Well, the thing is, the beauty of the COVID era was that I got to umpire with mates. I got to work with mates for 2 consecutive seasons, and you don't often get that. The beauty for COVID was, for most countries, obviously you ended up working with people from the same country, but it doesn't necessarily mean the relationships are going to be great. I was just lucky I had Rifle, Tucker, Oxenford, Boone, and that was the core of what we had for 2 years. That was the first thing about it, which I take out of that, was out of COVID, which we don't like to think about, but it's actually great from a work perspective. If you're going to be spending that time away from home, unless you're doing it with people you get along with really well. And in the moments in the games, I think in a way you just appreciate, I suppose as a cricket follower, person who played it, you appreciate the skill, you appreciate the performance. And in a way, that's that cool moment, Boxing Day with Paul Rifle, who played, Paul's played Boxing Day tests, and here he was umpiring them, which he never thought he'd ever get a chance to do. That was pretty cool. The test match you talk about with Boland, that was a quick test match for an umpire. That's great. I mean, it's all over just over 2 days, so I don't have to work for 5, so that's good. The one in Brisbane, Rishabh Pant, outstanding. The test before, where they drew that test, which they shouldn't have, they had no right to draw that test. There was a couple of drop catches and a great partnership there in the second half of the day. On day 5, got into a draw, and that probably was the reason why they won the series and got up there in Brisbane at 1-1 and won that test. So, and a team that was injury riddled. Kohli goes home after the first test, so that the way the India won that series was quite incredible. It's a credit to them how well they did and to actually do that, particularly in Australia as well. And the England series, and the Ashes, it was just cool to be part of. I mean, you get to know other people from all the teams, because you tend to be staying in the same hotel because it was COVID and it was like a lockdown situation. So that part of it as well came into it. You were spending a lot of time with those players on and off the field, and that worked out okay. And the Scotty Boland one as well, not just the fact of 6 for 7, but it was a guy that I'd umpired coming through the ranks, and here he was getting a debut on his home ground, and to do what he did, which was pretty cool to watch. They're ones you sort of walk away and reflect back on and go, that was, you see it come up on the replays, come up on television occasionally, you see yourself out there and, oh, hang on, I was on field for that. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And we had stuff in BBL games that we had been there. It was just a wow moment, whether it's finals or certain games. And so, I was quite lucky from that point of view. I've done stuff in World Cups, whereas a couple of standout games, Pakistan, Afghanistan at Headingley, that was just a full house, real passionate from a political point of view. People talk about Pakistan, India. It's nothing like Pakistan, Afghanistan. That is full on. And people in the world don't quite get that. It's, you got political slogans off the back of planes, and, the passion in the stands about what beating, for Afghans to beat Pakistan it was a fever pitch. So to be part of that game was different, unique, but memorable. So there's a number of ones you can drag out that were great to be part of. I did a couple of tests in New Zealand where I saw Williams get a double 100, Joe Root get a double 100. Yes, on pitches that were benign, but they're still getting double hundreds, and it's just great to watch and be there and watch it, and the skill level on show. Yeah, so pretty lucky from that point of view. Yeah, and being able to do it in COVID at home, and with the India series and the England series, which are the 2 big ones, to walk away and think, you know what, it might have been only a few tests I did, but there were some memorable ones in that group of tests that I did. So pretty cool.
Yeah, yes. Well, certainly those 2 were quite memorable. Certainly watching it at the time, as many were. But obviously being out there in the middle and witnessing that was like, it doesn't get any better than this, seeing what these 2 great teams are doing. India and obviously Australia and England, the Ashes is a big rivalry, as we saw last summer, obviously, and what we'll see next year as well. It comes around pretty quickly, the Ashes series. But obviously touring the world and, exploring different countries, what's been the favorite place that you've gone to and said, wow, this is not a bad country to, well, first of all, travel, but to umpire or watch a game of cricket? What's been the one country that's stuck in your mind, Paul?
Well, there's actually quite a few. I mean, we're quite lucky on the cricket roster. There's quite a few different countries to visit for different reasons. For me, the chance to go to the Caribbean. So I was able to go to Barbados, Grenada, St. Lucia. on a one-day series, England West Indies. That was great fun. Having never been there before, that was everything I expected and probably more. And I was able to take my wife on that trip as well. So she said, anytime you're getting appointments to those parts of the world, I'm coming with you. So that was a great trip from our point of view. For me, for the first time, I've been back there a couple of times since Sri Lanka as a country. What a place to visit. Outstanding country, people, etc. Loved it. India and different parts of India. Like I got a chance to go to Dharamshala a couple of times during the 23 World Cup for a couple of different stints. And what a fascinating part of the country. Just an outstanding scenery. Just it doesn't feel like India. It's a weird thing to say when you go. It doesn't actually feel like India because it's so different because you're up in the mountains. That's one thing again stands out. But yeah, and then the traditional ones like with South Africa, Zimbabwe, for different reasons. England, love it. New Zealand, what a great place to go. I've umpired in Europe, as I said before. So I mean, in America, the thing, and to top it off, the fact now the last 4 years I've spent going back to America for Major League Cricket. If you said to me 5-6 years ago, by the way, you'll be working every year and traveling around America doing cricket, you would have laughed at them. But now we're on the cusp of something quite big. It's getting there slowly, but it's getting bigger and bigger. And the fact the Olympics are there in 2 years' time, we worked at the brand new facility at Pomona near LA, which is going to be the Olympic venue. It's just Dallas has now established itself as a cricket venue, which who would have thought that again 5 years ago, a place in Dallas which was a AA baseball team, the Grand Prairie Air Hogs, is now the base of the home and the office of MLC. And here we are working at the Coliseum in Oakland, where the A's play. That's just, I'm very blessed, Jack, to the places I've been from an umpiring perspective. I've been to Hong Kong, another place that's had cricket on a postage stamp size ground where they play their cricket there. So, I've been really lucky. And most places you go to is just, they're all great for different reasons. You always discover something new every time you go back, and it's been a pretty cool experience.
Yes, definitely. It's the great thing about cricket, isn't it? It's played all a part of the world, and meeting people who like the game. And I've been fortunate enough to interview quite a lot of people from the cricketing world, especially associate nations, and just talking to them about how they've grown the game in those countries that you never thought they would play cricket, like the US or
actually UAE as well.
Countries in Europe as well.
I go back to the UAE every year, so as well for IL-T20, and the UAE gets stronger and stronger every year with the cricket. 3 established venues, obviously Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, Dubai, and that's growing. They're linking in now with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other countries around the region. So and who knows what that looks like in 5 to 10 years' time. I see it being bigger. Saudi Arabia, it looks like they're getting more and more involved in cricket, and we know what happened with the emergence of Live, and I've got the shirt on today with Ripper GC winning at Live Golf overnight. But with that opening up again in that market, who knows what that's going to look like in the next 10 years. So it's exciting. We've got new regions and emerging areas of the game that it's great for the game. Really is.
Yes, definitely. Obviously, you worked with a lot of people and colleagues at your time. Is there one that sticks out, you enjoy umpiring with, funny guy, or just great to be around with, on the field when it's a long, hard day for 90 overs? You need some cheering up.
Well, I've mentioned 3 up the top before, with Bruce Oxenford, Paul Rifle, Rod Tucker. 3 great people, great umpires, outstanding umpires. So anytime you're allocated with those guys, it's going to be no matter how tough it is, from a cricket perspective, it's going to be you got the right person with you. And I'd put up there Ian Gould from England. He was just a fantastic umpire, great person, just one of the best player managers I ever saw as an umpire, bar none. So they're 4 straight at the top that if you allocate with those guys, you're in for an enjoyable day. And Richard Kettlebrough I'd also put in that category as well. Another one that I've worked with is outstanding. I'd probably give you another 4 or 5 as well, with different parts of the world for different reasons. But straight up. But I've got Ruchira Puligurigo out of Sri Lanka, great mate of mine. Gregory Brathwaite out of West Indies. So again, guys from different parts of the world that I've had, been lucky. Murray Erasmus, another one. Obviously, everyone knows Murray, but he's exactly what you see: calm, good humour, you're in great hands when you work with him. So, yeah, I mean, we're lucky we've got quite a number of quality people involved in umpiring. You can see why they succeed at what they do. They're just great people.
Yeah, definitely. There may be some up-and-coming umpires listening to this episode, Paul, and maybe unsure about how to go about things with umpiring and on their journey there. So what advice would you give to any young and up-and-coming umpires who may be listening?
First and foremost, be yourself, be authentic. Don't try and be someone you're not. Don't try and be, you might not take mannerisms from your favourite umpires, but ultimately it'll come down to when the pressure's on, that it'll come down to what you're like as a person and how you're wired. So the earlier you wire into that, the better. Try and read the game as well as you can in advance, or try and read how the game's going, because the difference often between the best and the rest is that ability to read the game, be game smart, game aware. Your rapport with the players, your conversations, your communication with players is always critical. It's a player's game, but at times you may have to get involved. But if you're seeing something evolve that in front of your eyes before it does, that's going to help you. I think in a way, it's a simple game that you just worry about the next ball. And I can't emphasize that enough. Don't worry about what's happened before. You can't do anything about it. Yeah, maybe talk about it after the game or digest it. You just got to worry about the next ball. But be authentic, be yourself. Have a sense of humour. You're going to need it. Be prepared you'll make errors, because we're all human, as I said before. Welcome to the human race, and it's bound to deal with that. And the fact that don't beat yourself up. Don't think about it too much. Park it. And having that sense of humour. And be there for your mate. Be there for your colleague. Try and help them have their best day today. We all often umpires worry about what they're doing, but if you can go into a game and just say, "What can I do today to help us have the best day?" That's gonna start your day off really well. So I hope that helps with the advice.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's definitely great advice. I think just be yourself and enjoy it and have fun and try and get better. And as you said, don't be too hard on yourself. I think we're all guilty of that.
We are. Yeah.
So it's important just to have fun, enjoy it, and that's why you do the job, or whatever you do in life, is because you enjoy it. So that's the main thing. So great advice there, Paul. Now, Paul, we've finally reached the last part of our discussion today. We're getting through the overs, a bit of overtime with the over rates.
It's all right.
We need to bowl the overs in the last half hour, as we often do in Test cricket these days. So I thought, to end our discussion today, we asked our listeners to send in some questions for you to answer, Paul.
Yep.
And we've got a couple of questions from a couple of listeners, and I'm sure Paul will answer them to the best of his ability. No doubt he will. So our first question is from Jihan, who's a regular listener of the podcast. His question to you, Paul, is, "Hi, Paul. I've got vague childhood memories of you as this massive fast bowler charging in for Australia in the late 90s in a few ODIs and a test match in India. What was it like bowling at Eden Gardens in those conditions? What were Australia's expectations going into that series? And did playing in India at that time prove much harder than the team thought, especially how they hadn't played there since the 80s for a one-off test 2 years prior?"
Well, first and foremost, good question. Playing at Eden Gardens is an iconic venue of the world. It's close enough to 100,000. So the noise is the first thing. The passion, the noise, the getting to see their heroes from India playing against a team that happened to be us. So being part of that was amazing. Just an amazing venue. It's hard to describe until you go to those types of places. So it's the noise first and foremost. I think in the heat at that time of year, because we're there in March, I think now March, April. So it gets pretty warm that time of year. So it's the heat, the noise. Our expectation is always to win the series. That's Australia's expectations going to any series, no matter what team we have, was to win. We obviously got this. We won the third test, but obviously we lost the first and second, unfortunately, as we documented before. And it was any challenge. I think, and he's right. 96 was a test match, a one-off, and we hadn't played since the 80s. So really, for us, it was adapting to the conditions as best we could, as quickly as we could. And again, those tour matches were vital for that. So the tour matches provided us that opportunity to do that. So whether it's from the officiating point of view, the grounds, the weather, whatever it might be, So in a way, I think, you often you probably think it's going to be tougher than what it is, and because we're going to India, it's completely foreign. But in a way, we adapted to the conditions better as the series went on. So that sort of meant that I think that we adjusted to those conditions okay. And by winning the last test, probably proved that, the Australian team at that stage did adapt. And then we saw from future tours, whether it's 2001, a famous one, and then 2004 when they won it, it was obviously clear that they'd learned a lot from the 98 series going into 2001 and 2004. So, it was just a completely different experience. Stuff you're not going to experience at home because the conditions are different, the pitches are different. Weather, you're going to get the similar weather in Queensland or, obviously in North Queensland, but not necessarily in other parts of Australia. So, foreign for a number of reasons.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for your question there, Jihan. And our last question, Paul, is from Nathan. And he says, did he ever think about going into umpiring after when he would eventually retire from playing?
Did I think about going to umpiring?
Yes. When you retired from playing cricket.
Yeah. I mean, I'd started thinking about umpiring before I even finished. So I remember having a discussion with Daryl Harper, probably at the year 2000. Funnily enough, it was a couple of years before CA came up with their first project panel. Jeff Elidos was the man that came up with that concept, funnily enough. So I started thinking about it, and the project panel hadn't been thought of at the time. And Daryl had actually made a mention. He said his famous words were that here in Australia, we don't seem to have that culture of having ex-players take up umpiring like they do in England. Of course, Daryl, Steve Davis, etc., worked with a lot of umpires from England who were ex-players. And we just didn't have that. So, funny enough, that sort of my thought around umpiring had started in 2000 about that maybe being a possibility. And when I retired in 2004, yes, it was in the back of my mind, umpiring. I took up the coaching angle to start with, but taking up the umpiring was certainly front of mind, depending how the coaching journey went for the first couple of years. And I took on two pretty tough jobs at the time, and umpiring seemed to be much easier, Jack. So that's what I did. So and here I am all these years later. So I'm quite glad that those coaching jobs were tough because umpiring's been pretty good to me. So I can't complain too much. So, I definitely thought about it a couple of times, and I obviously took it on seriously in 2006, and on we went.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for your question there, Nathan, and thanks to everyone who sent in their questions for Paul to answer. And he gave very good answers, as you would expect. Well, Paul, we've finally reached the end of play. It's now time for stumps, as we say, over and time. So thank you for joining me today for this cricket discussion. I've enjoyed it immensely and learned so much from our chat today, and I'm sure everyone listening and watching would have enjoyed it as well. Paul, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they do that? If they want to contact you or anything like that, your promotion plug?
Well, these days, man, I'm certainly on Instagram. You find me at Blocker Wilson, so that's probably the easiest one. So I'm on that sort of stuff. So obviously, if anyone's serious about getting in contact with me, I can obviously get my details through yourself if that happens. So if they make contact, obviously won't put them across the podcast, but I'm on Instagram, mate. So that's one way of getting a hold of me. So, but besides that, if you're keen on getting in contact with me, or get a hold of you, Jack, and then I'll go from there.
Yeah, definitely. We'll leave links in the description of this episode to Blocker's Instagram for people to access that and do as they see fit. Before we go, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. So the podcast is available on Anchor, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you, Paul, for joining me today for today's cricket discussion. I hope all of you watching or listening to this cricket discussion with Paul learned a lot about Paul and his cricketing journey. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.